Welcome, and thank you for joining us today as we discuss how to appeal to next generation of students. My name is Lauren Ellison, and I'm a key accounts executive at LeadSquared, and I specialize in the education industry, and I'm going to be your host today. Joining me are three incredible industry leaders. We actually have one who's struggling with technology a little bit today, and it wouldn't be a virtual webinar without something funny happening, but John Lewis is trying to join us shortly here. But we have Bobby Babra, Managing Partner and CEO for FlipEd Ventures, Monica Carson, Chief Growth Officer for American College of Education, and John Lewis, the VP of Branding and Content Strategy at Universal Technical Institute. So I'd love to have each panelist tell a little bit about themselves. Bobby, could you kick us off, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning, everybody, and delighted to be here. I'm Bobby Babra, CEO of FlipEd Ventures. I've spent about 27 years of my career in the education space, covering really K-12, post-secondary education, and then workforce upskilling and education. My firm, FlipEd Ventures, now focuses on working with private equity groups and helping with strategy work and capital and investment, with a key focus around adult learners and adult upskilling. We kind of think about it as where the post-secondary education and the workforce education overlap. That's the area of thematics and thesis that we do our work on. And really excited to be here and share some of the lessons learned and experiences along the way. Had the good fortune of upskilling 170,000 students at Penn Foster Education, adult learners, and a lot of what I'll be sharing with you here is lessons learned through that journey, and others like University of Phoenix, etc. So thank you for having me, and looking forward to it.
Thank you so much, Bobby. Monica.
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning and or afternoon, depending on where you're calling in from. I'm Monica Carson, Chief Growth Officer at American College of Education. I've been in higher education now going on 21 plus years. My span of control has ranged anywhere from kind of frontline recruitment to ultimately the role that I serve today in growth and strategy for American College of Education. At ACE, we are focused on the adult learner. We have degree offerings all the way from bachelor's completion up to doctoral programs. In addition to, over the last, call it 5 years, we've started to put an emphasis on focus on micro-credentials. So trying to find shorter degree programs to be able to serve the immediate need of the adult learners. And also offer degree programs in the verticals of education, healthcare, and business. I think one unique thing and angle and view that we bring at American College of Education is we've really tried to push the envelope in respect to affordability and providing, affordable education for students who come to our program. One of the things that I think has set us apart over the years is that we've opted to not take federal financial aid. So that presents a unique benefit, but also challenge at the same time when you think about meeting the learners and what their needs are and where they are at in their career. So super excited to be here. Look forward to engaging with my colleagues in the discussion and interacting with you on the call today.
Awesome. Thanks, Monica. We're happy to have you. And I see John was able to join. John, welcome. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Right on time.
Well, I clearly have attained my father-in-law's technology capabilities, who quit a job 1 year early because they asked him to start a blog. So he retired early for a year. So that's about where I'm at. But John Lewis, VP of Brand and Content Strategy for Universal Technical Institute. I will not use our initials that most people know us by because they're a little bit embarrassing. But basically what I do is run an in-house ad agency across the whole shebang. We have CRO testing teams, we have UX, design, videography. We do almost everything in-house except media buying. And we have a very diverse group of students across the country. who are amazing younger people and older people looking for secondary careers, and people coming out of the military. Been there for just almost 6 years, and came out of the agency world into in-house, into education. And I'm paying a lot of money to ASU for 2 of my daughters, so that's also my education. So there's that too.
Great. Well, we're so excited to have the 3 of you, and I can't wait for the lively discussion ahead of us. So just to take care of a few housekeeping items before we get started, to avoid distractions or any kind of background noise, all of the attendees will be muted, so you don't have to worry about your dogs barking in the background or a bird singing outside your window, whatever may be happening. If you are having issues with volume, try clicking on the setting wheel to either change your audio device or adjust the volume. We're really hoping to conjure up some ideas. So if you do have questions throughout the webinar, please throw them in the chat. If we have time at the end, we can answer some of those. And if we do run out of time, we can follow up with you separately after the webinar to get your questions answered. All right, let's get started. So today we are going to discuss the new majority students. Who are they? What are their expectations? And what does it take to engage them? But first, we want to kick it off with a poll. We'd like to hear from you. So we'd like to get a sense of what's working or not working for you as far as current prospect nurturing processes and technology. So feel free to add comments in the chat as well if you want to elaborate on your answer. But we're going to start with our poll to learn how satisfied you are with the technology you're currently using. So you should see a poll popping up. And you can submit your vote. I appreciate everyone participating. It looks like we have some results rolling in. People are somewhat satisfied. So that's great. Please continue to respond to the poll, and we'll go ahead and jump into the topic for today. All right. The next generation of students is incredibly diverse. So we can no longer use these traditional college learner to build our marketing and targeting strategies. We have to really appreciate the wide variety of background and experience that these students are bringing to the table and understand the unique expectations they have of their education. And in order to appropriately increase enrollments, we have to start appealing to this new majority. So let's take a dive into how diverse this situation really is. Although the term next generation may conjure thoughts of fresh high school graduates, that's really only one piece of the puzzle. The truth is we need to view the next gen in a broader sense. So we're seeing a growing number of non-traditional students entering the higher education landscape. These could be first generation students, they could have kids and work full time, they could experience food insecurity, or maybe all of the above. The diversity is really exponential. Bobby, could you talk a little bit about how you see this diversity impacting the ability to provide a meaningful experience for each student?
Yeah, happy to kick that off. You know, that slide is a daunting slide because you do see hopefully a perspective of diversity all pulled together and makes it look so complex in terms of how do you possibly engage and recruit and bring along such a diverse group of learners. But sort of speaking from my own personal experience, you know, we really approached diversity from the angle of retention and less from an angle of recruitment. I'm sure my colleagues will talk a little bit about the recruitment angle of it, but for us, it was really about sort of recognizing the fact that because there's so much diversity, we felt that if any of this subgroup felt isolated, disrespected, unappreciated, tokenized, you know, that they would ultimately leave, and they would go seek environments that were more familiar, where they were surrounded by similar types of demographic cohorts. And so we stressed really hard to make sure that we surrounded these groups with the right amount of support systems that they needed, recognizing their diverse needs. We found common themes that try to stitch together. Even though there was diversity, there was always a common theme underlying what motivated them. And that often had to do with employment outcomes. And so we tried to distill the data to find what was common. There is always some unifying outcome that people are seeking, and we try to focus on that, which happened to do with wage appreciation, job placement, career advancement. And so we really looked at it as two-part. One is it was important for us to recognize that they're diverse and give them the support structures so we could retain them. And second, we focused on sort of what was common to all of them and try to reinforce that through our supports offerings and really cater to their needs. So a lot of them we found had a disadvantaged start in some case. They were second chance learners. And so we went the extra mile to build those on-ramps back into the education system for them, whether that be through helping them with transcripts, helping them figure out what transfer credits would work for them or not, and helping them with outplacement and job placement. So it's just sort of my perspectives on when I see the diversity angle, how we've sort of approached it given the complexity of the task at hand.
Great, thank you, Bobby. Insightful views from the retention standpoint, definitely. John, on the recruitment side, could you just tell us a little bit about how you're handling engaging this large of a group with so much diversity?
Yeah, that's a great question. So historically, we've taken kind of a very national approach to our advertising and our marketing. Part of it was just, I think maybe, like we've matured a lot as an organization and worked hard. We had, quite frankly, a marketing advertising staff that primarily were people who managed agencies. And so they really relied on the agencies to tell us what to do. And we've decided to flip the switch. Our headcount's gone up a little bit from what it was, not a lot. And instead we hired people with either agency thinking and strategy or with a lot of agency experience. And what that has allowed us to do is take a much deeper look because instead of like relying on people who do it, we hired a lot of people who have done it. And so now we do a lot of both qualitative and quantitative analysis and we treat every market. We're really looking at, especially as we go into our new fiscal year in October, every market is its own entity. And we will have an overlay of national advertising because we are coast to coast. But we really are looking at each demographic city as its own makeup. And within that, we're dealing with not only race diversity, but we also have our students really make up three categories. One are those just coming out of high school. One are those who are maybe younger people who've gone into college and it's just not for them because they just really want more of a hands-on experience, or they realize maybe they're at a bit of a dead-end job and need to switch over. And then and then there's some older people who want to just get into what they loved and realize they're not happy. And I guess, well, that's kind of those two are in the same category. And then we have the military. So on top of gender diversity and ethnicity diversity, we have a really disparate age diversity within it too. So we really have to decide how much do we peel back the onion and how do we grow into that. And some of it is giving ourselves a little bit of grace to say, hey, maybe we haven't always done it well in the beginning. In other words, we had the goofy personas most people do. Angie, who was those are pretty unusable to me. But we dug much deeper into really trying to understand what's like somebody with a Hispanic background, right? Like maybe second generation in America and Florida is very different from second generation, probably in Texas, Southern California, and Arizona, meaning one, they come from Mexico and the others could come from Cuba or other places. And we needed to even start looking at how that diversity within makeups of Hispanic groups are. So we are not, like what Bobby said earlier, pandering or, the worst thing is for a brand or a company to try to pretend like they're in the know or they're hip to what's happening right now, but really taking the time to be authentic and real to who we are as a brand. But also to what Bobby said is the good news is with what we do, there is a lot of commonality that a lot of these people already kind of feel like outliers because they didn't learn the way everybody else did. And they maybe don't like the more kinetic learners. And so book learning, they're trying to get past. So both the good news is, regardless of ethnicity and age, we do have some overlap in people that they find their tribe when they come to our schools. But there is, the age gaps are very difficult for us sometimes with students, where the older students, we have uniforms, they'll take care of them better, and the younger people won't. So we do have to kind of play around with that and really understand who we're talking to and why.
Yeah, I definitely know it can be challenging taking every market as its own entity and really personalizing outreach to those people. So like you said, they don't feel like you're pandering to them. Monica, for you, how many different types of audiences are you trying to actively engage at any given time?
Yeah, that's a great question, Lauren. And I think to John's point, as any organization, you're always looking at different ways to peel back the onion, right? As John mentioned. But from an active audience perspective, I would say that, our approach is really looking at the different demographics and categories that we serve based on degree level and interest, and starting at the top, right? And so trying to segment out the different types of students that ultimately we will be targeting and are speaking to, and then drilling down. So, I mean, if I put an average on it, I would say at any given point, we probably have, 20 to 30 different audiences that we've built a structure and a flow for, to be able to accommodate based on, where they are at in their career. What are their ultimate goals in pursuing their education, right? Because most of our education is focused on master's and doctorate level. While we do work in the undergraduate and certificate, the majority of our population is master's and doctorate, right? And so those individuals are really at different points in their career, in their life. And so what we do is we start at the degree level, and then based on where they are in their ultimate goals, where they are in their career, then we start to segment out based on that. And then we also have to look at state, right? Because in our instance at ACE, we serve predominantly educators. And so for every educator, their path is different, right? Depending on, are they going into administration? Are they going to stay in the classroom and just hone in on their skills? Do they want to move from one state to another? And so we have to be very thoughtful and mindful about our approach, because ultimately, when you think about the audiences that you serve, you want to get to that individual support and that individual communication, but obviously that's not scalable, right? And so we try and cast the widest net with the most impactful information to then help kind of narrow the funnel down to be able to get to the point to ultimately address the individual student needs. So I think as our organization, we've tried to be very thoughtful about kind of the top level, and then how we whittle it down to ultimately getting to the unique student need, to be able to support, to ensure that they have all the necessary tools and resources to make that good decision to support them with their long-term goals, from a career and or education perspective.
Yeah, definitely. And I know it's a huge undertaking to create these like custom journeys and create a personalized experience for 20 to 30 different audiences. And that's not even everyone you would ever want to reach out to, right? That's amazing. So thank you so much, panelists. Audience, we'd like to hear from you again. We're just curious, how many different types of audiences, or personas, if you want to call them that, are you actively engaging? And please feel free to elaborate in the chat if you'd like, but enter your answer in the poll, and I'll just give a couple seconds to see what we have rolling in here. Right now it's pretty evenly distributed among 1 to 2, 3 to 5, and 10 plus. So it looks like different strategies, 10 plus is growing, but different strategies across the board here as far as how to strategically reach out to this diverse group. All right, so next we really want to explore what's complicating this group's decision to continue their education. So these new gen students, they're coming back to school for a wide variety of reasons. They could be focused on moving up in their career, or maybe they're being pushed by their employer to upskill to keep their job, or it's possible they're changing careers because they're ready for a lifestyle change. On top of this, though, the group has several concerns related to going back to school, such as the perceived value of education or possibly childcare issues that prevent them from continuing their education and inhibit them from taking the leap. On top of this, at a macro level, there's a general feeling of uncertainty about the economy and the evolving future of work. So institutions really need to approach their audiences with a more sophisticated touch to appeal to their aspirations while reducing these inhibitions. And we know you're here today to learn tips on overcoming some of these challenges. So let's really focus on this inhibitions column. John, can you speak to some of the challenges you're working to overcome at your institution?
Yeah, that's so I would say two of the biggest ones we're facing right now are relocation. So if you do want to relocate, many of our campuses, we call them metro campuses. So it's primarily focused with people who can drive, but those who can't, we do have some campuses like in Avondale, Arizona, just outside of Phoenix, where there is a fairly large population of people who travel. And I think it's combined with everything, but the inflation within housing, especially in Phoenix, which is just astronomically, it's one of the cities that, I mean, I know across the country we've faced it, but that's really one of the biggest inhibitors we face right now. And so some of the things we've looked at to solve that problem is, obviously in education, there's a lot of compliance issues, but we look at opportunities like, are there grants we could put together for relocating grants to try to help those people who are trying to overcome that and working within the confines of what, government regulation and ensuring that we're doing everything to fit. I just want to say that because I always get nervous when it comes to, things along these lines, but it's a really important thing. And it's one of the things that we're finding is the hardest for people to give up, while at the same time, my father-in-law was over the other day, same guy who was struggling with his blog, and he was helping me out with some stuff. So I said, I'll take you anywhere to lunch you want to go. And he picked fine dining at In-N-Out Burger, which I do love. I'm not putting it down, but my waistline says I need to try something else. So nonetheless, we went there, and there was a sign right out front for hiring cashiers starting at $19.50. And so when you look at, oftentimes we're training entry-level technicians. We do have a part of our business where we do train like Ford's technicians, but that's a totally separate thing from our schools. Is that's also a hard thing to overcome, especially with the younger generation who is like, hey, I'm not really a forward thinker. I'm not thinking about 10 years down the road of what this is going to be, or, even if you're a server in a restaurant, or, it's like, hey, that's great, but you could be making $25,000, $30,000, $35,000 a year right now, but you're going to blink in 10 years in the future when all your friends have continued on and you're still making that. And it's not really a job you loved. And it's hard sometimes for them to see that foresight. So it's really focusing in on helping try to see what that long-term picture looks like relative to where they're at today. But it's hard. I mean, it's hard in the moment because you turn on the news everywhere, and the job of the media is to get us all freaked out so we tune in and click on their links. So it's very scary out there. And so making these very financial decisions to bring on debt at a time when, the job you're going to get afterwards is going to be about what you're getting paid right now is a frightening thing. So it's really helping them see the bigger picture and helping make those, for the older students, that idea of uprooting their lives, whether they have families, and making it more affordable with the housing component, because they're not getting rid of their housing back home. They're just taking this on as well. So those are the two big things that we're trying to work on right now.
Great, thank you. And Monica, I know in our previous conversations, you've mentioned the time element as another important aspect. Can you speak to that and how it's impacting your population?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to, Lauren. As I shared, our primary demographic that we serve are either in the healthcare, nursing, and/or education world. And as we all know, over the course of the last 2.5 years, the challenges that both of those industries have seen and faced with regards to just the added pressure in their day-to-day jobs, right? And that doesn't include what is surrounding them in their life as well. And so one of the big challenges that we hear and we see is just with regards to the level of time commitment, right? So as John was mentioning, his organization, it's about the relocation and finding the housing, whereas we're a fully online institution. A lot of our students that we serve are in one of those fields that is high demand and is requiring a lot of extra time from them. And so it's a matter of us helping to see and helping to show how they can fit it into their schedule to be able to take that next step, right? And to be able to meet that next goal, whether it be for their career or their personal aspirations. And so we've been very mindful about how we approach scheduling, to be able to ensure that, you know, those prospects and those individuals that we're working with who have that constraint from a time perspective can see how it can be accomplished, by building out scheduling and also building flexibility where you can into your programs, to allow for those instances to where, you know, the demand of the job may be higher at different points in time throughout the year. So, you know, taking educators as the example, we all know that, you know, typically they have some time off during the summer, right? If they're not engaged in activities, summer school activities or other things like that. And so we've actually built flexibility into our programs to where educators can take multiple classes, so that it lends to alleviating some pressure during the school year to where if they need to take time off through their education journey, they have the ability to do so. And so I think you just have to look at it from a very unique lens, because ultimately I think time, right, is a motivator, but time also can be a deterrent too of going back to school, because time is, you know, is of the essence in a lot of cases for individuals who are continuing their education. It's going to lead to that promotion, right, in their field, or it's going to lead to the next opportunity or door opening. And so we try and really look at it and tackle it from the ability to be able to show, right? Because if you can show someone where they can start and where they finish, and how they can get there amongst a busy, crazy schedule, then that always helps alleviate the concern that a lot of folks have. I mean, it's the reality that I think we're all up against, no matter what type of degree, whether it's, you know, micro credentials, whether it's single courses, whether it's a full degree program. I think, you know, we're all seeing that and we continue to see that. And so it's trying to meet the student to be able to see, to visualize and help them see that it's still possible.
That's great. And actually, Monica, we have a question in the chat that I'm hoping you can tackle. It kind of relates back to reaching out to 20 or 30 different audiences and just really all the initial work it takes to execute this very personalized and customized nurture campaign. How do you stay focused and cut down on the unnecessary work and still do what's needed to be authentic and aware?
That's a great question. And I would say from my perspective, it's been, for us as an institution, it really comes down to collaboration and priority. I think, you know, we have made a commitment to hold true to who we are and the integrity of the institution. And so I believe we do a really good job of setting priorities and creating barriers to not, I guess the term we've used in the past is scope creep, allowing outside projects and other influences to come in. And so we're really diligent as an organization. And it's across the executive level, but then also it goes down into our leadership teams to be able to ensure that we create a roadmap, right? So we create a roadmap for our students. We do the same thing for us as an organization, to where we create a roadmap and we really hold ourselves accountable to not going off course, right? And I think that allows us to keep the focus and to also keep the spirit and the integrity of what we're trying to do to meet our students, right? To ensure that they're getting all the right necessary information, and ultimately their journey feels, it feels like it's all, you know, it's all integrated together. And so it's through us setting the priority and holding ourselves accountable to sticking to those priorities that has allowed us to create a more customized approach, but still allow us to do our day-to-day as well. So I think you have to be really intentional when you start to go down this path. You have to be really intentional about what your goals and outcomes are, and use the data to be able to drive how you prioritize the different segments and the different campaigns that you want to put into place. So hopefully that helps. You know, again, it's not easy. It's a very daunting task whenever you initially start out, but with data and setting those goals and expectations as an organization, and all committing to sticking to those goals has allowed us to be able to do that.
That's awesome. I love the way you said you create a roadmap for students, then you create a roadmap for the organization itself. So just being intentional about those goals and outcomes. And we're actually going to dive a little bit more into that topic next here. And on a macro,
if I just have Lauren, if you don't mind, just like to add one thought to the current slide. As I was listening to my colleagues talk about it, I would just say, this is a very powerful slide, and it's the content's, genuine and accurate. But the solution to bridging this aspiration innovation gap that I've seen work at scale, quite frankly, is to bring the employer into the conversation. And I tend to look at things from the workforce angle. And if you think about the current situation with 11 million jobs unfilled, about 20 million jobs that are going to be transitioned in some way over the next decade, employers are the ones that are in some cases hurting the most if they don't close the skill gap and the employment gap. And so what institutions that are doing really well and that are successful at driving enrollments and continuing growth are, in my opinion, the ones that are working with employers and the workforce to create programming that is best suited to fill those jobs, to upskill the incumbent workers and get new workers into the professions. And so because that aligns incentives, right? That, and what we've also seen is employers are willing to underwrite the education, part of the education, in order to get that talent pool into the organization. So I think what my sort of macro point here would be, this is all about ultimately jobs and income and wages. And so drawing the employer conversation into it and thinking of this as an outcome for the student, paid partially by the employer, and designing programming that works for the jobs that are in need, I think is sort of the way to solve this logjam between aspirations and innovations.
I love that. And I think it really goes along with the outcomes that Monica was talking about too. Ultimately, for your students, you want them to get a successful career after they graduate from your school, right? So including that employer aspect is very important when creating these strategies.
Right.
Thanks, Bobby. So on a macro level, we've attempted to wrangle this really large, diverse group and place them into 3 different buckets to make them more manageable. When you're looking at the traditional college age, this is the group that's younger than 25, seeking a degree for the first time. We also call them Gen Z or Zoomers. And the adult learner group, we're specifically focused on adults over 25 who are working to complete their degree or expand their skill set to advance their career. And then we have this third group that we're considering employer influenced, and they're looking to increase their skills with continuing education, usually at the encouragement of their employer or to keep their existing position. So Bobby, could you describe a little bit about how we can take these buckets and learn more about each group and target them based on what's most important to them?
Yeah, I think this is a terrific slide because it kind of takes a lot of the complexity that we all try to tackle and bucketize them into three categories. Going back to that idea we spoke about at the beginning, whereas there's common themes, even though there is diversity, there are common themes that we can sort of surface and try to target in our efforts. And what we find is that it's really sort of on the far left, if you think about the traditional college-age person or individual, they're on a journey to discover a path. This is your traditional age student that is out of high school, looking to get into get an undergraduate degree, and a lot of them are struggling with what's the right path for me, what's going to create the right career outcome, what degree is going to result in a job or a profession. And so what we found is really important is helping them understand how to discover their path and focusing on that. They're not as motivated in sort of skill development or income or salaries or job, but they're really motivated by what is the right path for me. The second cohort, these are adult learners. They're in the workforce. Maybe they have a job already. They're trying to figure out, is this the best job for me? Do I want to transition this job into a career someday? And so this group, we try to focus our efforts on helping them with that career discovery. You may have your first job, you may be making $30,000, maybe $50,000, but what are the skills you're going to need to turn that job into a career? And then the third group that it's really about people that you can also even consider them as mid-career, and they're at a point where their jobs are transitioning. Their companies are going through massive transformation. Supply chains are changing. Jobs are being automated. And this group is thinking, what are the skills I need to stay relevant? And so, we sort of broadly in our minds try to think about what's top of mind for them, and then tailor our programming, our messaging, our nurturing and engagement efforts around these three macro common themes across the subgroups.
Thank you. Yeah, you've really laid out some insightful questions to explore, to really learn more about these three different groups and how to engage and retain them as well. John, what are some of the data points that you are using to make decisions regarding outreach to these different populations or different audiences that you're reaching out to on a daily basis?
Yeah, so we use both really qualitative and quantitative. So we've really started investing a lot more in setting up interviews with different student groups at different campuses across the country to really hear from them firsthand. What matters to them, what are they interested in, what brought them here. Of course, I think sometimes the qualitative, you have to be a little bit careful. In a former career, MPD Food Group did a survey where 85% of the people wanted, they want healthy options on a menu, but less than 10% people ever order it. So restaurants invest in it and, they lose money. So you have to take a little bit of that, with a grain of salt, but we do want to hear from the students and see what it is that matters to them. And then apply that to, we create basically guides for our different groups that we're looking at, and we're creating them. We create them by campus and by program as well, that help us govern that. And we also look at the quantitative analysis of our advertising. We have a very robust testing methodology and testing group that tests everything from our messaging to our visuals to our landing pages, to our forms, and then we are able to, as they inquire or click on things, we're able to separate out that data by age groups and geographic data and other things that start to help us understand what messages are resonating with them. And we're also working with our front lines, our admissions teams, and I think this is really important because we don't have like a macro economist on our staff right now. So instead, as things change so quickly with our economy and, starting to deal with these, high paying kind of, for lack of a better term, right, what used to be for me a high school job in the summer, now are almost career options and make probably more than my wife does as a social worker, to be honest with you. And so it's working with the admissions teams and being able to, through our CRM system, distribute kind of bucketing maybe 4 or 5 different areas of the most common themes of what people are telling them. So for the kids who inquire and want to come here but don't even enroll, what are the biggest outcomes and why, and separating that data by each group. And then for those who actually enroll but who don't end up showing up to class, why is it that they don't? So that's really a kind of a wide breadth of qualitative and quantitative we look at to help inform kind of both how we're talking to them during the admissions process, but like Monica, we have fairly detailed roadmaps for these different segments. So this helps inform our nurture campaigns and our advertising, the content on our website, what we're putting out in social media, to what we're talking to them face to face. So it's really trying to understand that across, and it's a lot. I mean, this is not an overnight, you flip on the switch and it's there. It's a lot of data. And then even understanding, data paralysis, got to get in there and start testing. Just understand that the quicker you get it out there and test it, if it works, great. If it doesn't, that's great too. You've learned what doesn't work, and now you don't have to do that again. You can apply the next thing. So having a fairly robust testing, methodology and a testing culture, I think is really important for any business, but certainly in education.
Yeah, I know it can definitely be an iterative process to figure out what's working, what's not working for all of these different populations. So I really appreciate.
Did you say iterative to sound smarter than me? Because now I should have said iterative. Now I just feel like a dipstick.
I was just Googling a thesaurus on the side.
Okay, that's good. That was good. That's a good word. 1 point for you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you both. Yes, it's really helpful to look at the qualitative and quantitative data. So thank you for your insights on that. Next, we want to flip gears and take a deeper look into what it takes to engage and retain this population. So appealing to the next gen of learners is highly dependent on your ability to communicate and advocate for this trifecta of student engagement. And the trifecta of student engagement for both the student and your institution lies at the intersection between growth, belonging, and ownership. When we talk about growth, we're referring to what motivates learners. So we don't want to just assess them. You want to survey them to find out how they define success and what outcomes they strive to achieve. Kind of similar to what John was mentioning, they do interviews with student groups. And then you want to show them along the way, along their career, their academic journey, that they're making progress towards achieving these goals. Another key aspect is really helping learners find a sense of belonging. People will stay longer at jobs and in relationships and even in cities when their identity matches with the identity of their environment. And then the third portion is, as we transition more to online learning, we have to help learners seek out and become part of the institutional brand and community of learners to foster that sense of belonging and emotional attachment. This has repeatedly proven to be the strongest lever for retention. So the new majority has increased need for ownership over their educational experience. They want to control and choose more variables than before, like the place, the time, the pace, their ability to blend online and offline, and so on. And offering these flexible options allows them to personalize their experience and aligns with this need for agency and ownership. So I'm going to have the panel explore how the trifecta of student success, growth, belonging, and ownership are impacting how they enroll, engage, and retain this new majority. Monica, if you could kick us off and speak to how you incorporate growth, ownership, and belonging at ACE, and how you're using those to drive engagement and success.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I think for us, when we think about the growth and the ownership piece of it, we really try and come to the learner, right, and give them. It's almost that concept of the roadmap that I talked about earlier, but giving them the tools and the informations to ultimately create their own education journey, but with guidance along the way, right? So from the point that they go on to our website to look at the different offerings that we have, to the point of the first email that they receive, to the point of when they talk to the admissions representative that we've talked about earlier. Along the way, we're trying to incorporate where ultimately it's still in the prospective students' hands with regards to how they navigate the journey when they make that decision, but ultimately we're helping to guide them along the way, which starts to build that sense of community within our college environment very early on. I think for ACE specifically, where we've put a lot of effort is really the concept of giving the students the tools and resources to be successful, but creating the culture and the environment within our education community, because we are a fully online institution. it's a little bit different than the traditional campuses in that you can't just say, hey, come to the student union for, you know, a gathering. Rather, we have to create that belonging virtually. And so you have to start from the very beginning, right? Of that initial interaction of when they go onto the website and or when they connect with someone voice to voice. You have to start from the very beginning. But once the students begin their journey, you know, we try to approach it in that they're becoming part of the ACE family, right? And how we do that is through our interaction, through our engagement, through the ongoing support and communication. That's part of the education experience, but also we take the personal experience and try and incorporate activities and or actions that our students can be involved in virtually. So for example, September at ACE is our month of service. And so that's something as employees, we are asked to go out and give to our community, but we've incorporated our entire student body into the month of service. So we're giving our students, because they're, you know, across the United States, they're international, but we're encouraging them to go out and give back, whether it be in the career that they're currently in and or within the community of a passion project that they have. And so trying to find ways to engage the student, not only academically, but as part of a community, I think really has helped us evolve as an institution that allows for a more streamlined approach to enrolling into the organization, but then the ability for them to persist from their first course to their second course to ultimately, right, our goal as being part of academics, right, is to set our students up to graduate and to go on to that next step of what graduation means to them. And so by creating the community, we're promoting that success along the way, that ultimately, you know, our students are part of the family, right? And when they graduate, they continue to be part of the family, and we put our arms around them to be able to provide support resources, whether it be that they want to come back to ACE and or other avenues and or other relationships that we have with different organizations to continue to help them grow as individuals as well. So it's a very unique approach, I think, that we've taken, and it really is about community, especially when you're only offering things online. You have to take a really different approach to how you create that community.
I love that. And I love how you mentioned, you know, it starts at the beginning, really just when they inquire about going to school with you, you know, the community building and the retention starts there. And it's really a goal for the entire organization from there on.
Yeah, I think the other thing, Lauren, that we've seen is that personal engagement and that personal relationship now more so than ever. I think whether it's in person or virtual, it means more than it ever has. And so being very intentional about that is extremely important.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bobby, what are you hearing and seeing in the industry regarding how institutions are creating a personalized student journey?
Yeah, happy to share. By the way, Monica, I love your comments on that. Fully agree with that 100%. You know, I'd probably call out a few things that in addition to what Monica said, that we identified as friction points, barriers that we focused on removing to improving enrollment, retention, and engagement. And I'll share some of those points with you. I think first thing, you know, we stressed a lot on is making the enrollment process, you know, really simple. We're dealing with an audience that cares for convenience. You know, they do these things in their consumer lifestyles all day long, the way they buy from Amazon, the way they use Netflix, and we use that as a way, as our sort of guidepost, if you will, to say we need to make things as simple as we possibly can in the enrollment process, in the discovery process. And so we emphasize that tremendously high in terms of our priorities and our roadmap in order to improve enrollments, because there's just tremendous friction in that process across institutions that we research. So I would put that as very high, is simplifying the application enrollment process, make it as simple as swipe, tap, submit if you possibly can, or at least use that as your target and get as close to that as you possibly can. The second thing that we prioritized, or maybe even as high as the number one, was simplifying and streamlining the financial commitment process. That's complex. I mean, you've got an environment where you've got income share agreements, you've got employer payment models, you've got student loans, and a myriad of other choices through which consumers and adult workers are paying and underwriting their education. And so simplifying that and making it very transparent and easier in terms of the choices that students have, how those models are going to work, what is the bottom line in terms of their financial commitment, and how can they pool together all their financial resources to pay for their education. I can't stress enough how important that is in the enrollment process to focus on. So those would be pretty high. And then I think that the third thing would be what we found in our own research is a lot of the websites, a lot of the institutional application processes and the enrollment workflows. What we found through our research is that as institutions, we don't do a good job of communicating the amount of support that we have to offer our students. And so they have to go through the advisement page, and they have to go to the student success page, and institutions are spending an inordinate amount of money to try to provide the necessary support and scaffolding around adult learners. But I think we can do a much better job of presenting everything we offer to them in a nice, simple way. And so that's something that we spent a lot of our time on, making it very easy to understand all of the benefits of coming to school at institution X and all the support services that you're going to have access to and how easy it is to get access to those things. So none of these necessarily mean go spend a whole lot of more money on anything. It's just do a better job at communicating what you do have and presenting that to the diverse audience in a simple, convenient way.
I love that. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll just add one thing on engagement that we spent and collected a lot of data. We were all online as well, 100%. So, from an engagement standpoint, we really stressed getting minute data on things like how much time a learner spends on their learning, how often they do it, how deep does that learning go in terms of the activities that they're engaging in or the homework assignments, etc. How much intellectual curiosity and thoughtfulness they bring to their submission. So we were extremely data and analytic driven in terms of understanding the level of engagement. So it went further than did they log in or not. And we went a lot deeper to understand when there were any at-risk signals or indication that we needed to intervene. So, building a good data analytics approach to collecting this data and having a team to study it and analyze it is critical on the engagement side.
Thank you, Bobby. Just to jump back to one of your previous point, I love where you talk about making the enrollment and financial commitment process as streamlined as possible. I think a lot of our future students are used to the consumer experience that they have with organizations like Amazon, where it's very easy for them to just click and buy, and they want to see that reflected in their educational experience as well. So really cutting down on those pain points and looking at data to understand where those roadblocks might be is really powerful. So thank you so much, panelists. We do have one more poll for the audience. We only have about 5 minutes left in our meeting, so I'm just going to throw the poll up. Please put your answers in, and then Vibeke will update you on the results in the chat. But we want to jump to our wrap up here so that we can get our experts' advice on this huge undertaking and everyone being left wondering, how do we pull it off? So we want to hear from you all. How are you pulling everything together from a system standpoint? What does it take in terms of human capital and technology, and what type of investments are you making to stitch together a complete student experience to meet the needs of the new majority? Monica, could you kick us off?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
No, I think from our perspective, it's again thinking about it and starting at the top, right, and looking at what are the key elements and resources that we need to put in place to ultimately connect all the dots, right? Because it's somewhat of a maze, and so always thinking about what the end goal is always the most important thing. So we always put the student first, right? And then we take it from a student first approach to then connect all of the dots, right? And so it takes an element of operations, marketing, recruiting, academics, right? And it's that roadmap that I talked about earlier of creating that visual so that we all know what direction we want to go. And then ultimately it's funny because we were just talking about it earlier today with regards to having that roadmap and journey of what we want the experience to be. Then we either will plug in and or create the technology and the communication tools and systems, whether it be internal to support our stakeholders within the organization and or external to support our students, making sure that all of those pieces connect, right? And so it's the most important thing is always keeping the student first and the student top of mind, and then building that journey map and resources, because it's not just one technology, but finding a technology that works for your organization to meet that overall experience, and then finding other technologies and or resources from a human capital perspective to be able to fit into what you want it ultimately to be. I mean, I could talk for hours on ultimately what that experience is, right? But if you start with the student first, then that always tends to help support the flow and the setup, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a really great thing to keep in mind anytime you're making decisions like this. John, how are you handling it?
Oh man, I could probably write a book, and I will if you guys want to give me a 7-figure advance. But it's a pretty deep. I would say start somewhere and don't be overwhelmed, and pick one small thing and one small audience group that you haven't thought about yet, that you think could be the most influential, that would have the biggest impact, and just do the Venn diagram of effort versus impact and start there and start testing. Use qualitative. Set up polls where you can ask them questions, interview them directly, ask them what they want, if they align with your main target audiences that you're not going after yet, but you think you could, and do as best you can finding data that can quantify what their actions are, whether it be within your website or through your advertising, and try to find wins, test things, test messaging all the way through the entire life cycle of that student, from the very beginning when they're first thinking about it and inquiring all the way through the end, because they have different needs throughout that life cycle. And just make sure, if you start with one and have wins, that's better than starting with 20, getting frustrated and not being able to do any of them. So give yourself grace, start with one, find out what worked, apply that to another one, let that work, but don't chew off too much at once, because you'll be frustrated because you're not going to see the results. Don't be like my daughter, who was getting only 10,000 views on her YouTube channel when she first started Bebe Beauty, giving beauty tips about 10 years ago, and decided, well, I'm not getting 1 million views after my 3rd video, so I'm out. So don't be that person, because if you stick with it and you just start small and be consistent, you'll learn a lot. And before you know it, you'll be reaching a lot more diverse audiences within your programs.
Great advice. Thank you. Bobby.
Being sensitive to time, I would, and my colleagues have made great recommendations. I would only add one thing, which is, if you can, bring your students into the process. Test this with them early. Get their input. Run prototypes by different demographic groups. See what works. Bring them into the user journey early on and get their feedback, because ultimately, as Monica said, this is for the student, putting the student first. And so I would say, test your designs and your processes with your students.
Perfect. I love that. Well, I just want to take a minute to thank our panel for sharing their experiences and expertise. I've really enjoyed chatting with you all today. And we will follow up with everyone who attended. And if you did have questions we weren't able to answer, we can do those over email. And we hope to have the opportunity to offer a glimpse into our sales and marketing automation platform, LeadSquared, at work if you're interested. Until then, please take care and have a great rest of your day. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank
Al.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.